Reading slumps suck. I don't know about you, but when I try to get into one book after another, not being able to connect to the characters, the world, the plot, it leaves me feeling incredibly frustrated. Especially when I know that under normal circumstances, I would have loved each and every one of those books that I tried. Fear not, my friends. I've got 10 books to de-slump you and get your reading gears grinding all over again. First, I want to talk about the book I'm currently reading, which has taken me completely by surprise with how good it is, and that is The Ember Blade by Chris Wooding. Osea is under Croton rule and has been for 30 years. Many of the youth don't remember what life was like before that, so they are quick to adapt to the Croton ways. The older generation, though, remember what it was like. Some have adapted, but some really want revolution. And that kind of sets the stage for our tale. You have many different characters set like chess pieces at the beginning of the book, and they slowly come together to go on an epic quest. And this has such Lord of the Rings classic fantasy vibes. You've got this camaraderie aspect with unlikely characters coming together, all to set up a heist to steal the Ember Blade, which is a symbol of the Osean people. And our characters are convinced that grabbing that Osean blade from the Crotons will help them gather more supporters and spark a revolution that will break them free of Croton rule. So like I said, classic fantasy Lord of the Rings vibe with the friendship, the quest, the magic, the world building. But there's also this grim, dark aspect of it, which I absolutely love. Seeing what so many people have to go through under Croton rule, the oppression, the savagery, really brings home that while this is an epic, fun quest, it's also got really high stakes. What I really love about this book is its pacing. It is fast. You don't rest for a minute. Your heart will be beating so fast. You will feel anxiety. You will feel the heartache, the betrayal, everything that these characters are going through, you're going to feel them. Speaking of which, the characterizations are amazing. Bit by bit, you learn more about this eclectic group of people who are forced to work together. You learn about their motivations, their history, and it really lends to the narrative of the story. I cannot put down The Ember Blade. I've only got less than 100 pages left, and it was hard for me to put it aside to come make this video because that's how good it is. I've already downloaded book 2. No word when book 3 will come out, but this is a fantastic series. Through its pacing, characterizations, and magic and world building will be sure to get you out of your reading slump. Along the same lines of high epic fantasy is The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne, which is the first book in his Bloodsworn saga. Book 2, The Hunger of the Gods, has already been released, and we're hoping that book 3 comes out in the near future. Heavily inspired by Norse mythology, John Gwynne is able to create lore all on his own, and it is fantastic and captivating. Our characters live in the crumbled remains of the gods that came thousands of years before them. Whispers can be heard of the gods reawakening, and not just the benevolent ones. Something is about to happen, and you feel the tension along with our characters. Some are out for vengeance, some are out for battle fame, and some just want bloody battle on its own. But no matter these characters' motivations, you are pulled through with them as they go through epic battles that John Gwynne is able to write through perfection, as well as unlikely friendships and amazing, vivid imagery of this fantastical world. It's been a minute since I've read the 2 books. What I do remember is not being able to put either book down and being amazed by the badass female characters who seek fame and vengeance. Personally, I think Brandon Sanderson is one of the best authors to get you out of your fantasy reading slump. And in this instance, I'm choosing Tress of the Emerald Sea to do just that. Brandon Sanderson has said this is his answer to The Princess Bride. With Tress, a woman who is happy in her very simple life is forced to leave all that she's known to rescue the man that she loves. This world is set in the Cosmere, which is the world that Brandon Sanderson has created with many of his novels. And while Tress of the Emerald Sea isn't necessarily directly linked to his bigger books and series in the Cosmere, such as the Stormlight Archive and the Mistborn saga, Tress of the Emerald Sea holds its own beautifully. You have an epic adventure at sea, found family again with these characters who you never think would go together but do, dragons, and a narrator that will make you laugh so hard if you're already familiar with the Cosmere. And like Brandon Sanderson does so well, this has its own unique magic system and world that is somehow connected to the Cosmere, but again, holds its own. This is a delightful tale that will be a great entry into Brandon Sanderson's universe if you haven't already discovered it on your own. If you love The Princess Bride but really love a role reversal, you love humor, adventure, this is a great book to get you out of your slump. If you're a fan of high fantasy, mafia movies and stories, as well as those with a modern twist, then Jade City by Fonda Lee will surely deslump you. This is the first book in her Greenbone Saga trilogy, and it is action-packed and a wild ride. A generation ago, the Greenbone warriors fought together to beat out their oppressors and gain back control of the island of Kekon. Now, a generation later, two families are basically at war with each other to not just keep control of Kekon, but also of the jade that enhances their strength and their fighting abilities. This is a book about power, about control, about money, and above all, about family. Fonda Lee was able to seamlessly and beautifully create this world that has both modern and fantastical elements to it. It is a tale filled with action-packed fighting scenes, power and corruption, and betrayal. But above all, it's about family and loyalty. And if you have to tear down the world to keep what's yours, you'll do it. How about a couple of heist novels to get you out of your reading slump? First I want to talk about is The Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo, which takes place in her Grishaverse, which starts with the Shadow and Bone trilogy. Now, full disclosure, I could not get into the Shadow and Bone trilogy, and I honestly did not feel deprived having just read the Six of Crows duology. And this is a duology. This starts with the Six of Crows, and the second book is The Crooked Kingdom. Our story starts in the underbelly of Ketterdam, which is a huge city in this universe. We follow Kaz and his crew as he is offered something that he can't pass up. An unbelievable chance at performing a heist that will leave them richer beyond their wildest dreams. There's a lot to do and plan and a lot of people to betray to get this plan started. And this is what we follow in The Six of Crows. I love this book because of its found family vibes, as well as the vivid imagery that Leigh Bardugo is able to write through her narrative about this kind of seedy underworld that they're all living in. This is a tale of overcoming past grudges, of learning how to trust one another, and learning how to land on your feet when not everything goes to plan. Great characters, great story, high stakes. This definitely will get you out of your slump, especially if you're a lover of heist tales. And it would be wrong of me to not suggest another Brandon Sanderson book in series under the heist genre. And that is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson, which is the first book in the first trilogy of the Mistborn era. I'm sure so many of you have heard of this book and this series before. And the premise is, what if the hero didn't win and a dark ruler did thousands of years ago? Well, you would be left in a world full of oppression, darkness, and pretty much a horrible life. That is the setting of the first book in the Mistborn trilogy. We follow Kelsier, Vin, and his motley crew of people as they not only attempt to overthrow the ruler, but perform a heist unlike any that's come before, and that is to steal this very, very elusive and important metal the Lord Ruler keeps all to himself. I'm sure you've heard about how amazing the magic system is in this trilogy. If you've heard anything about Brandon Sanderson and this series, it is a metal-based magic system called Allomancy. I would be happy to go into more detail about the magic system, the world, and Luthadel, which is the city that this is taking place in. So if you want to know more about the series and my thoughts on it as a whole, please let me know in the comments. But I will just tell you that I fell in love with Vin, especially. To me, she is one of the best female protagonists I have ever seen. But I also fell in love with the rest of the crew in this series. When I finished the third book, called The Hero of Ages, I cried. I cried at the end of that book because I didn't want to let go of this cast of characters. And I'm not ashamed to admit it. I truly believe that Mistborn and the trilogy will get you out of its reading slump with the way that you are invested in these characters, with the innovative, spectacular magic system, and this vast world that Brandon Sanderson creates so well. Sometimes for me, there's nothing like a YA fantasy book or series to get my reading gears grinding again. And for that, I have two recommendations. The first is Pet by Akwaeke Emezi. This is set in a somewhat utopian world where monsters have been eradicated and people are living in peace and pretty much feel that they have nothing to fear in terms of violence, in terms of diseases. It seems like a wonderful world. Maybe it isn't as much as we think. While this is a really small book, it packs a powerful and profound punch. We follow Jam, who is a transgender girl living with her loving parents. At first, we're just following along in her life, but then she fears that there are monsters back again. In her mother's youth, there was a revolution of sorts where all monsters were eradicated. And I'm not talking necessarily monsters in terms of what we think in fantasy. I'm talking about human monsters, their cruelty, crime, their brutality, and lots of other horrors that I'm sure we can imagine. Well, those have all been eradicated, but something is telling Jam that it hasn't been. And while she's pondering these thoughts, something else happens. Jam's mom, Bitter, is a painter. And as she's going through her ponderings about, is everything really as good as it seems, she slips and falls on one of her mother's paintings, leaving a drop of her blood behind on it. Something awakens in that painting, and that is a monster hunter. This is a magical surrealism fantasy book. While it is a character study, I found it also to be quite fast-paced. And it really leaves you thinking about things. I love books that leave me pondering and questioning things in life. It really speaks to what you don't know can hurt you, and to trust your gut more than what other people are telling you to trust. This was a fascinating, thought-provoking read, and while it is YA, it does not read YA because of its adult themes. And if you like Pet by Kweki, then I highly recommend you pick up Bitter, which is the prequel to this novella. Another fantastic YA fantasy series is the Sunbearer Trials by Aiden Thomas. This is book 1 in what is to be a duology, with the second book haven't coming out yet. We follow Teo, who is the son of a goddess, as he's basically flung into a Hunger Games-esque competition where the winner gets to be the Sunbearer. Now, I know that all sounds a little confusing, but let me explain a little bit more. Basically, the Sunbearer has a very, very important job, and that is to carry the light of the sun, which replenishes the magic and life on their world. While the winner of the Sunbearer Trials has this great honor, they also have to sacrifice themselves in order to give their world the life that it needs. The competition takes place with 10 children of 10 gods. But don't worry, it's not nearly as morose or dystopian as the Hunger Games. In fact, it's quite the opposite, and that's why I love this book so much. It is fast-paced, the characters are just lovely, and it is a queer normative world where there is no homophobia at all. In fact, people like Teo who are transgendered are often revered, for they are able to find their authentic selves from within. There is humor, there is heartbreak, there is action, and there is found family. I absolutely enjoyed every moment of the Sunbearer Trials. It is heavily inspired by Mexican lore, and you can really feel that through the vivid imagery that Aiden Thomas provides through his narrative, as well as his explanation of gods, goddesses, and how their magical world works. This is a fun ride, and I highly recommend it if you are willing to give YA a try. This was a great tale. The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang was able to get me out of my Brandon Sanderson Cosmere book hangover. This is a fantastic read that is inspired by Japanese culture with a modern flair. We follow Misaki, a mother and wife who lives in the Kaiganese Empire, as well as her son Momoru, who is 14 years old and is learning how to become a warrior. You see, where Misaki and Momoru live is known as the Sword of Kaigen because they are the first and most hopeful line of defense against invading empires. So their warrior lifestyle is normal for them. They don't realize that actually the rest of their world is much more modern. They don't really realize that their culture is quite different from that of the rest of their country because it has much less technology, less modern luxuries, and that is very purposeful because things start to change when Momoru realizes that not all in his life is as he thought it was. I kind of want to leave the plot right there because there are so many secrets revealed in this novel. But more than that, wow, the battle scenes that happen in this are epic. There is magic, there is sword fighting, and there's a lot more. There is blood and gore, so I hope you're not afraid of that, but it is fascinating and entrancing. I highly enjoyed each and every battle scene. But what I loved more were the characters, how invested you become in them, and their arcs as well. More than just war and battle, this is a story about grief and war, and how one does not come without the other. Both Misaki and Mamoru go through so much, and you're along on the ride with them, but the side characters do as well. You will feel great heartache, but you will also feel great triumph. More than that, you are with these characters as they pick up pieces of themselves and their world after war. Easily one of the best standalone novels I've ever read, and it was recommended by Patrick Leo, whose booktube channel I absolutely love. It got me out of a slump, which is not an easy thing to do. So if you really love kind of like an ancient Japanese culture with some modern flair embedded into it and deep character study, this will surely get you out of your reading slump. What about you? What books have gotten you out of your reading slumps? I'd love to hear all about them in the comments below. Also, I'm wondering if you've read any of these books that I've mentioned today and your thoughts on them as well. And if you like my book recommendations, please like and subscribe because I really want to be part of a fantasy-loving community where we can share each other's opinions, thoughts, and recommendations. And if you want a few more recommendations, please check out my video of my top 5 standalones because those may get you out of your slump as well. Thank you so much for watching and happy reading, everyone.